Welcome to Fear Spiral, where the night hides more than just shadows. Tonight we're taking you on a journey through 10 true night road trip horror stories, from the eerie hitchhiker in the rain to the deserted motel at mile 46. These are real encounters, abandoned roads, shadowy figures, and terrifying moments that will make your heart race. Picture yourself driving alone at 2 a.m., headlights cutting through thick fog, rain pounding on your windshield, and someone standing on the side of the road watching, waiting. Every story is told in first person, so you'll feel the fear as if it's happening to you. If you love true horror that will leave you looking over your shoulder, smash that like button, subscribe, and comment which story chills you the most. Keep your eyes on the road, and whatever you do, don't look back. The Hitchhiker in the Rain. It was the summer of 2019, and I was driving alone from Flagstaff to Albuquerque, a stretch of about 4.5 hours through mostly empty desert highways. I had just finished visiting a college friend for the weekend and decided to head home late Sunday night to beat Monday traffic. By the time I left, it was a little past 11:30 p.m. The sky was a deep charcoal, and the rain had just started to come down in thin, misty sheets that blurred my windshield like fog. The first 2 hours were uneventful. I had the radio on low and a travel mug of coffee in the cup holder. The highway was practically deserted, just the occasional pair of headlights flashing by in the opposite lane. Around 1:50 a.m., the rain started to get heavier. The rhythmic thumping of the wipers was almost hypnotic, and I remember starting to feel that strange highway daze, when the road stretches endlessly ahead and you feel like you're the only person left in the world. Somewhere near the old Route 66 intersection, I saw a figure on the shoulder of the road, faint, just a silhouette at first, illuminated by my headlights cutting through the rain. As I got closer, it became clear. A man was standing there, completely drenched, wearing what looked like a gray hoodie and jeans. He had his thumb out. Normally, I'd never stop for a hitchhiker at that hour, but something about how soaked he looked made me feel guilty. The temperature had dropped to about 45 degrees, and he was shivering. I slowed down, rolled my window down halfway, and called out over the rain. "You okay, man? You need a ride somewhere?" He nodded slowly, pushing his wet hair off his forehead. His face was pale and his eyes looked dark, not in a sinister way at first, just empty, like he hadn't slept in days. "Yeah," he said quietly. "Just to the next town. My car broke down." There was a slight hesitation in his voice, but I didn't think much of it then. I unlocked the passenger door and he climbed in. The smell of wet clothes and cold air filled the car immediately. "Thanks," he muttered, staring straight ahead. "No problem," I said, trying to sound casual. "Where's your car at?" He paused for a few seconds before replying. "A few miles back. It stopped working." I didn't want to wait out there all night. Something about his tone was off. Flat, emotionless. But I figured maybe he was just exhausted. The rain was pounding hard enough now that we could barely see beyond the headlights, and the sound filled the silence between us. After a few minutes, I noticed he wasn't wearing a seatbelt. "You might want to buckle up," I said. He slowly turned his head toward me and smiled faintly. "It's okay," he said. "It won't be long." That sentence stuck with me. It won't be long. I wasn't sure what he meant by it, but I didn't ask. We drove in silence for another 10 minutes or so before I saw a green highway sign up ahead. "Gallup, 26 miles. "Almost there," I said, glancing at him. But when I looked, he was staring out the window into the darkness, his mouth slightly open as if whispering something. His lips were moving, but no sound was coming out. I tried to listen, but between the rain and the tires on wet pavement, I couldn't make anything out. Then, as if out of nowhere, he said quietly, "Did you see her?" "See who?" I asked. He turned his head slowly toward me, his eyes wide now. "The woman standing by the mile marker," he said. My heart jumped. I hadn't seen anyone. The stretch we were on was pitch black. "No," I said carefully. "I didn't see anyone." He kept staring at me for a long moment, then turned back to the window and whispered, "She's been following me since my car broke down." I didn't know what to say. I glanced at the rearview mirror, half expecting to see someone in the road behind us, but there was nothing. Just darkness and sheets of rain. My pulse quickened. I wanted to drop him off as soon as possible. Around 2:30 a.m., we finally reached a gas station on the outskirts of Gallup. The place was dimly lit, with one flickering light above the pumps. I pulled in and parked under the awning. "Here you go, man," I said, forcing a smile. "You can wait inside till morning." He didn't move at first. Then slowly he turned toward me again. Up close, I could see that his hoodie and jeans were stained with something darker than water. Maybe oil, maybe mud. His eyes were completely bloodshot. "Thanks for the ride," he said quietly. "Don't go back that way." Before I could ask what he meant, he opened the door and stepped out into the rain. I watched him walk toward the edge of the parking lot, not toward the store, but back into the dark highway. Within seconds, the rain swallowed him up. I sat there for a few moments, just staring after him, unsure if I should follow or drive off. Finally, I decided to tell the gas station attendant, a middle-aged guy reading a newspaper behind the counter, about the man I'd picked up. The attendant looked confused and said, "You sure you saw someone out there?" "Highway's been closed past the bridge since last month. Washed out by a flood. Nobody should be walking that stretch." I froze. "He said his car broke down back there," I told him. The man shook his head. "There's no road access for 10 miles past that point. Just canyon and riverbed." I stepped back outside and looked down the highway. The rain had stopped and the road was empty. No footprints. No car lights. Nothing but wet asphalt shining under the station's yellow glow. To this day, I don't know who I picked up that night. The local sheriff told me later there had been a fatal accident on that stretch of highway about 2 weeks before. A young man whose car went off the road and into the canyon during a storm. They said his body wasn't found for 3 days. Every time I drive through New Mexico now, I avoid that route. And whenever it rains, I swear I can still see the outline of someone on the shoulder in my headlights. A figure with his thumb out, waiting for another late-night driver who doesn't know any better. The car that followed us, this happened in December of 2021, a few days before Christmas. My best friend Ryan and I were driving home from visiting his parents in rural Nevada. We both lived in Los Angeles at the time, and since we decided to take the long route to avoid snow through the mountains, it was close to a 10-hour drive. We left his parents' place late in the evening, probably around 8:45 p.m., and expected to reach home around sunrise if we kept moving. It was one of those long, empty stretches of highway that feel almost detached from the world. No streetlights, no gas stations for miles, just a black road slicing through endless desert. The moon was barely visible behind thin clouds, and our headlights felt like the only thing holding the darkness back. The first few hours were fine. We talked about random stuff, blasted music, and stopped once to grab coffee from a 24-hour diner around midnight. When we hit the desert roads past Tonopah, the traffic completely disappeared. It must have been around 1:40 a.m. when Ryan said, "You realize we haven't seen another car in like 30 minutes? I laughed. That's Nevada for you. But deep down I had started feeling it too, that weird emptiness like we were driving through a vacuum. You start to notice how fragile your little car feels when there's nothing but silence and cold wind outside. Then, sometime around 2:10 a.m., I noticed headlights behind us in the rearview mirror. A car had appeared out of nowhere, maybe half a mile back. I didn't think much of it at first, but after 5 minutes those same headlights were still there, steady, never gaining or falling behind. Ryan turned slightly in his seat. "Guess we're not alone after all." "Yeah," I said, squinting into the mirror. Weird how close he's sticking, though. I figured maybe it was just someone heading the same direction, but when I changed lanes to pass an old truck, the car behind us changed lanes too, immediately. Not tailgating, not speeding past, just matching every move. The next few miles felt heavier. The highway curved through small hills, and every time we turned, the headlights reappeared perfectly behind us, as if the driver was glued to our bumper at a precise distance. Ryan got quiet. "That's creepy as hell, man." "I know," I said, forcing a laugh that didn't sound convincing even to me. "Probably just some guy keeping distance. Don't overthink it," but inside I could feel my chest tightening. The road was empty except for us and that one pair of headlights. The rain from earlier in the day had left thin puddles glistening on the asphalt, and every now and then, the reflection of those lights would shimmer across the road like something alive. At 2:30 a.m., I decided to test something. I slowed down from 70 to 60 miles per hour. The car behind us slowed down too. My fingers tightened around the steering wheel. Then I sped up to 80, so did they. "Always the same distance behind," Ryan muttered. What the hell does he want? We considered pulling off at the next exit, but the next sign we saw said, "Next services, 42 miles." So we kept driving. A few minutes later, Ryan rolled down his window halfway, trying to see if he could spot the make or model. "Can't tell, too dark. Looks like maybe a sedan. Old one, maybe early 2000s, he said. No front plate either. The road stretched on endlessly, flanked by dark, rocky hills. The feeling of being watched crept into my bones. I kept glancing at the mirror every few seconds, almost hypnotized by those twin white eyes following us through the blackness. Around 3:00 a.m., we hit a long, straight stretch of road that went downhill slightly. I could finally see the car clearly behind us. It was a dark blue or black vehicle, maybe a Toyota Camry. The weirdest part was that the headlights flickered occasionally like the driver was tapping them, but there was no pattern to it. Ryan said, "Flash him. Maybe it's a trucker trying to signal something." I tapped my high beams twice. No response. The car just kept following, steady as ever. At this point, we were both wide awake. The silence in the car was suffocating. The only sounds were the engine and the soft hum of tires on the wet road. I could feel sweat beading under my jacket even though the heater was off. We decided to pull a bluff. At the next small dirt road we passed, barely visible in the dark, I turned my blinker on and slowed as if I was about to take it. The car behind us slowed too. My stomach dropped. I didn't actually turn. I hit the gas and sped back up to 85, merging back into the lane. The car behind us did the exact same thing, matching my acceleration perfectly. That's when Ryan said something that made my blood run cold. "Dude, look at his headlights. They're getting closer." I looked again, and sure enough, the light was brighter, closer. The driver was closing the gap slowly, deliberately. It felt predatory, like he wanted us to know he was there. Ryan leaned forward, his voice tense. "Try losing him." I floored it. T, 95, 100. The car behind us stayed right there, maybe 50 feet back, unwavering. Then, out of nowhere, the headlights suddenly vanished. I blinked, confused. "What the?" I slowed down, scanning the mirrors. Nothing, no car, no lights. Just the empty, endless desert stretching behind us. "Where did he go?" Ryan whispered. The road was a straight shot for miles. There was nowhere to turn off. No side roads, no exits, no cover. We would have seen brake lights or dust, but there was nothing. We drove another 10 minutes in uneasy silence, both too shaken to speak. Just when we started to convince ourselves maybe the car had pulled over or turned off without us noticing, the headlights appeared again, but this time, they weren't behind us, they were ahead, far down the highway. In our lane, 2 white beams pointed directly toward us, like the car was now facing us head-on. "Jesus Christ," my Ryan said. Gripping the dashboard, I slammed on the brakes. The car stopped about 100 feet short of where those lights had appeared, but just as suddenly as they came, they flickered out. Gone again. No car, no movement, no sound except the wind outside. We sat there staring into the void. The hair on my neck was standing straight up. Ryan whispered, "How the hell did he get in front of us?" I didn't answer. I couldn't. I threw the car in reverse and backed up a little before speeding forward again, my pulse hammering in my ears. We drove non-stop after that, not daring to slow down. Every few minutes, one of us would glance behind, half expecting those headlights to reappear. When we finally saw a gas station around 4:10 a.m., we pulled in fast and parked right under the floodlights. The attendant looked startled when we burst through the door. I told him there was a car following us, maybe trying to mess with us. He frowned. "Out there?" he asked, looking out at the highway. "You're the first car I've seen in 2 hours." Ryan and I stayed there for about 20 minutes, drinking coffee and watching the road through the window. No headlights ever appeared. We eventually got back on the highway just as dawn was breaking. The sky was pale orange now, and the emptiness didn't feel as suffocating. Still, both of us kept glancing at the mirrors the entire drive home. A few days later, Ryan looked up reports from that stretch of road. Turns out there had been multiple incidents over the years. People reporting a phantom car that followed them late at night, matching their speed and disappearing without a trace. Locals called it the ghost of Highway 375. I don't know if what we saw was supernatural or just some psycho playing a twisted game, but I do know this. Those headlights weren't from any normal car, and the way they vanished reappeared ahead of us and then completely disappeared again. It didn't make sense. Even now, when I drive long distances at night, I can't relax. Every time I see headlights in my mirror, I feel my heart start to race, waiting for them to flicker out again, waiting for that impossible moment when they reappear where they shouldn't be. Because once you've been followed on a desert road in the middle of nowhere at 3 a.m., you never really forget what it feels like to be someone's target in the dark. The motel at mile 46, this happened in October of 2018. I was 26 at the time, driving cross-country from Portland to Austin for a new job. It was supposed to be one of those exciting solo adventures. A few days on the open road, podcasts, gas station snacks, and small-town diners. But that trip is something I still don't like talking about. I don't even drive at night anymore because of it. By my third night on the road, I was somewhere in New Mexico, south of Albuquerque. I had been driving since early morning and planned to stop before midnight, but the desert stretched on longer than I expected. Around 11:15 p.m., I realized I hadn't passed a single rest stop or motel in almost 90 miles. My GPS showed nothing but empty road ahead. The gas gauge was just above empty, and the nearest town was over 40 miles away. Then, as if on cue, I saw an old faded sign on the right side of the highway. It said in peeling red letters, Mile 46 Motel, vacancy 2 miles ahead. It was the only light I'd seen for a while, and even though something about it looked off, the letters crooked. Half the bulbs burnt out. I decided to take it. I figured it would be one of those old roadside motels where truckers stop to crash for the night. When I pulled in, the place looked like it hadn't been renovated since the 70s. A single neon sign buzzed weakly, and only 3 of the rooms had lights on. The parking lot was cracked and full of weeds. A flickering street lamp stood near the office door, where a faded open sign hung crooked in the window. I got out of my car, and the air was cold, dry desert cold that cuts through your jacket. The smell of dust and old oil lingered. Inside, the front desk looked like a time capsule. Wood paneling, a rotary phone, a small TV playing static in the corner. After a few seconds, an older man came out from a back room. He looked to be in his late 60s, gray hair, glasses, wearing a red plaid shirt tucked into worn jeans. His expression was friendly enough, but his eyes, they didn't seem to focus quite right. "Evening," he said, smiling faintly. "Need a room?" "Yeah," I said. "Just for the night." He slid a ledger across the counter. "Cash only." $65. I hesitated but handed him the cash. He handed me an old-fashioned brass key attached to a wooden tag that said Room 7. "Out back near the end," he said. "Don't mind the noise. Some pipes rattle when the wind hits." I asked what time checkout was. He said, "Whenever you leave," with a little chuckle that didn't match his blank stare. As I stepped back outside, I noticed how silent everything was. No traffic, no crickets, not even wind. Just that eerie motel stillness, or the kind that feels too empty. Room 7 was near the back, facing an empty field. The lights in the parking lot didn't reach that far, so it was mostly dark except for my car headlights. The room itself was exactly what I expected. Old stale smell, beige wallpaper peeling at the corners, a heavy green carpet that felt damp. There was a small TV bolted to the dresser and a single lamp that flickered when I turned it on. I remember checking the bed. It was clean enough, though the blanket looked decades old. I was too tired to care. I locked the door, double-checked the chain, and got ready to sleep. Around 12:40 a.m., I woke up to a sound. Faint, rhythmic tapping. At first, I thought it was the pipes the owner mentioned. But then it grew louder, more deliberate. Tap, tap, tap. It was coming from the wall behind the bed, the one facing the next room. I sat up, listening. It would stop for a few seconds, then start again. Slower this time, like someone tapping their nails against the wall. I checked my phone, 12:47 a.m. Trying not to freak myself out, I told myself maybe it was just plumbing. I put my pillow over my head. But then came another sound. A creak, followed by what sounded like soft footsteps outside my door. I froze. The footsteps stopped right outside. I could hear faint breathing. I whispered, "Hello?" Instantly regretting it, no response. Just silence, except for that same breathing, slow and steady. Then, after a few seconds, something scratched the door. A single, long drag of fingernails against the wood. I grabbed my phone, turned on the flashlight, and aimed it at the door. There was a small gap under it, and for just a second, I saw shadows moving. the outline of someone's feet. Then they turned and walked away, slow and heavy. I waited maybe 10 minutes before I worked up the courage to look out the window. The parking lot was dim under the flickering light. No one was out there. Only 2 other cars, an old pickup near the front office, and a gray sedan parked across the lot. When I finally fell back asleep, it was uneasy and shallow at 3:22 a.m. I woke again, this time to a sound from inside the room. It was a whisper, not loud, not clear. Just something like, "Don't look." I sat bolt upright, my heart pounding. The room was dark except for a sliver of orange light coming from under the curtain. My throat was dry. I whispered, "Who's there?" Nothing. Then I noticed something on the carpet near the edge of the bed. Wet footprints, bare, small, like a woman's or a child's. They led from the bathroom toward the door. I reached for the lamp, but before I could turn it on, the tapping started again, this time directly from the bathroom door. Tap, tap, tap. 3 slow knocks. I was shaking now. I grabbed my car keys and phone, unlocked the door, and bolted outside. The air was freezing and I could see my breath. I ran to my car, got in, and locked the doors. For a second, I looked back toward my room and saw that the light inside was flickering violently, like someone was turning it on and off. Then through the curtain, a shadow moved, tall and thin, pacing slowly back and forth. I started the car, ready to floor it, when I noticed the motel office light was still on. Against my better judgment, I drove up to tell the owner someone had been in my room. When I stepped inside, the front desk was empty. The little bell on the counter had dust on it, like no one had touched it in weeks. I called out, "Hello, sir?" No answer. I looked toward the back office door. It was open just a crack. A faint light glowed inside. I hesitated, then pushed it open a little more. Inside was a small office. Old file cabinets, yellowed papers, and a coffee mug half full of what looked like moldy sludge. But what made my stomach drop were the keys hanging on the wall. Each one was labeled with a room number. Only one key was missing. Room 7. There was also a stack of old police reports pinned on the corkboard, half covered by papers and dust. I leaned closer. They were dated between 1997 and 2005. The top one read, "Missing persons. Travelers last seen checking into the Mile 46 motel. Room 7 reported unoccupied at time of search. Investigation ongoing." I backed away, my heartbeat hammering in my ears. That's when I heard the office phone start ringing, loud, shrill, breaking the silence. I stared at it for a moment, frozen. Then against all sense, I picked it up. There was static at first, then a faint voice. A woman's whispering, "Don't stay there. He comes back at dawn." The line went dead. I dropped the phone, sprinted out, and didn't stop driving until the sun came up. When I looked back at the map later, there was no listing for Mile 46 motel. No sign of it on Google Maps, no trace in local business records. The nearest motel with a similar name had burned down over 15 years ago, at Mile 46 on the same stretch of highway. Sometimes, when I think about that night, I wonder if what I saw was a haunting, or something worse. I still remember the voice, the footprints, and that flickering light in the window as I drove away. And every time I pass an empty motel on a dark road, I can't help but look twice, and half expecting to see a wooden key tag that says Room 7 waiting for me again. The detour through the woods. This happened to my girlfriend Emily and me in the summer of 2022. We were both 24 at the time, driving back from a weekend cabin trip in northern Oregon. It was supposed to be our little getaway. No phones, no stress, just the 2 of us in the quiet woods. We left the cabin late Sunday evening, around 9 p.m., because Emily had work early the next morning. The drive home to Portland was supposed to take just under 3 hours. The plan was simple: hit the main highway, stop for gas once, and get home by midnight. But around 10:15, just past a small town called Oak Ridge, I realized we were running low on gas, lower than I thought. My GPS said there was a station about 20 miles ahead, but as we drove, a sign appeared on the side of the road. Highway construction ahead. Detour via Miller Creek Road. I figured it was no big deal. The GPS automatically rerouted us. The new path looked longer but manageable. A winding road cutting through some dense forest. The sky was overcast, no moon, and the headlights barely cut through the dark. The deeper we went, the narrower the road became. Trees closed in like walls on either side. "This feels sketchy," Emily said quietly, staring out the window. "Are you sure this is right?" "Yeah," I said. "GPS says this connects back to the highway in about 14 miles. She nodded but kept glancing out into the trees. The woods looked wrong somehow, too still, too thick. The further we drove, the more it felt like we were leaving civilization behind. The cell signal had dropped to 0 bars about 10 minutes earlier. Around 10:45, we passed a small wooden sign, barely readable in the headlights. Miller Creek Campground and closed. It looked old and weathered, tilted slightly, as if no one had been there in years. That's when I noticed something weird. The road markings disappeared. No lines, no signs, just uneven gravel. I slowed down to about 25 miles per hour. The forest was so dark it felt like the car was floating in a tunnel of black. Emily turned down the music. "Do you hear that?" At first I didn't. Then I realized what she meant. A faint clicking sound like something hitting the underside of the car. I stopped and got out to check. The night air was cold, thick with the smell of pine and damp earth. The only light came from the headlights, slicing through mist that seemed to hang just above the ground. I crouched and looked under the car. Nothing. The clicking had stopped. "Anything?" she called from inside. "No," I said, getting back in. "Probably a branch or rock." But as soon as I put the car in drive, we heard it again. Click. Click, click. This time it wasn't under the car. It was outside near the passenger side window. Emily grabbed my arm. "Stop." We sat still, listening. The clicking got louder. Then a shape moved between the trees. Quick, just a blur, but enough for me to catch it in the corner of my eye. "It looked human. Did you see that?" she whispered. "Yeah." My voice was barely audible. Could have been a deer. Or someone camping, maybe. But there weren't supposed to be any campsites. The sign had said closed. I pressed on the gas and we started moving again. The road curved sharply and the forest grew even denser. Then Emily gasped. "Look." Ahead, maybe 50 feet, stood a person on the side of the road. They were facing away from us, wearing what looked like an oversized gray hoodie and dark jeans. They weren't moving, just standing perfectly still at the edge of the road, their head tilted slightly to one side. "Should we stop?" Emily asked. "No," I said immediately, keeping the car rolling slowly past. As the headlights swept over the figure, I realized their hoodie was soaked, clinging to their body as if they'd been standing in rain. But it hadn't rained in hours. I tried not to look, but as we passed, I caught one horrifying detail. Their feet were bare, pale, and streaked with mud. Emily turned around in her seat, staring out the back window. "They're still standing there," she whispered. "Still watching us." My hands were slick with sweat on the steering wheel. "We're almost out of this, Em. Just hold on." We drove in silence for several minutes, the road twisting through unending trees. Then we saw another person. This one was crouched by the side of the road, facing away like they were digging at the dirt. Their clothes were dark, hair matted. I slowed down instinctively. "Don't stop," Emily said, her voice trembling. "Please don't stop." I didn't. As we passed, I swear I saw the person turn their head, but their face wasn't clear, just a flash of something pale. Like their skin was covered in ash or dust. My heart was pounding so hard it hurt. At 11:20, the GPS suddenly froze. The blue route line vanished, replaced by the words, "No data." We had no idea where we were. A few minutes later, we saw a fork in the road. No sign, no markings, just 2 gravel paths disappearing into the dark. I stopped the car. "What do we do?" Emily asked. Before I could answer, that clicking sound came again. From behind us this time. It was louder. Closer. Emily turned slowly toward the rear window, then screamed. In the red glow of the taillights, 3 figures stood in the road, all motionless. All facing the car. One of them, the one in front, was the same shape as the person we'd seen before, in the soaked gray hoodie. Only now I could see their face, or what was left of it. Their eyes were wide and sunken, mouth slightly open as if frozen mid-breath. I slammed the car into drive and tore down the left fork, gravel spraying behind us. Emily was crying, gripping the door handle. They were right behind us. Oh my God, what were they? I didn't answer. I just kept driving. Branches scraped the sides of the car like fingernails. The headlights flickered as we hit potholes. The air felt thick, electric, like a storm was about to break. Then the road opened into a small clearing, an old bridge crossing a creek. The wood looked rotten, but there was no other way across. I floored it. The bridge groaned under the car's weight but held. On the other side, the trees began to thin out. My chest loosened for the first time in an hour. We drove another few miles before finally spotting a faint light up ahead. A gas station. I've never been so relieved to see fluorescent lights in my life. We pulled in around midnight, both shaking. The attendant looked up as we stumbled inside. "Where'd you two come from this late?" he asked. "Miller Creek Road," I said, still catching my breath. His face went blank. "You sure about that?" "Yeah," Emily said. "The detour sign led us there." The man frowned. "That road's been closed since the flood last year. Washed out the bridge. Nobody's supposed to be driving up that way, and it doesn't even connect to the highway anymore." We just stared at him. "We crossed the bridge," I said. He shook his head slowly. "That bridge collapsed months ago." Emily started crying again. The attendant offered us a seat and some water, but we couldn't stay. We just wanted to leave. When we finally made it home around 3 a.m., I checked the map. There was a Miller Creek Road, but it stopped dead 4 miles from the main highway. No recorded detour. No construction warning. A week later, I looked it up again. Turns out several hikers had gone missing near that same area over the years. Their last known locations were all near the old bridge. Locals said the woods were haunted by people who drowned during the flood, people who never found their way out. I don't know what we saw that night. All I know is when you're driving alone through the woods and your GPS tells you to take a detour, don't, because sometimes the road isn't leading you away from danger. It's leading you straight to it. The gas station at the edge of nowhere. This happened in 2019 when I was driving cross-country from Arizona to Washington. I'd been on the road for nearly 14 hours that day, trying to make up time after getting delayed by a sandstorm outside Flagstaff. By the time I crossed into Oregon, it was already close to 1 a.m. I remember the night vividly, a moonless sky, the kind where the darkness feels heavy like a weight pressing down on your windshield. I was running low on gas and my GPS showed the nearest station about 12 miles ahead. The highway was empty, just endless black asphalt cutting through rolling fields and forest patches. Around 1:20 a.m., I saw a faint glow in the distance, a flickering red sign that read gas, food, open 24 hours. Relief washed over me. I pulled in, crunching gravel under my tires. The place looked old. The kind of station that might have been bustling 40 years ago, now half forgotten by time. One of the lights above the pumps was stuttering, buzzing faintly. The windows of the convenience store were plastered with faded posters for brands I hadn't seen since the early 2000s. There were no other cars. Still, I parked next to one of the pumps and killed the engine. The night air was cold and smelled faintly of rain and old oil. A single moth banged repeatedly against the buzzing light overhead. I got out and reached for the pump, but the digital screen was dead. No lights, no numbers. I glanced toward the store. The open sign was lit, but it flickered on and off every few seconds. I hesitated. Then I decided to head inside to ask if the pumps were working. The moment I pushed the door open, a small bell jingled overhead. The inside smelled like dust, gasoline, and something faintly metallic, like rust or blood, I couldn't tell. The floor was old linoleum, peeling near the corners, and the coolers along the back wall hummed inconsistently. Behind the counter sat a man, or maybe slumped is a better word. He looked to be in his 50s, wearing a greasy baseball cap and a worn flannel shirt. His eyes were half open, staring somewhere past me. "Hey," I said. "You still open?" He blinked slowly, then nodded once. "Pumps aren't working," I added. "Do I need to pay inside?" The man tilted his head slightly, as if processing what I said. Then in a voice that sounded dry and strained, he replied, "Pump number 3's working. Just gotta reset it from here." I glanced outside. There was no number on the pumps, just 2 old metal ones, both unmarked. "Which one's number 3? I asked, half joking. He stared at me for a few seconds, then smiled faintly. "The one you parked at." The way he said it, calm, almost too calm, made the hairs on the back of my neck stand up. I forced a small laugh and nodded. "All right, thanks." As I turned to leave, I noticed something odd. In the reflection of the glass freezer door beside me, I thought I saw someone standing in the aisle behind me. A dark shape, tall still. I spun around. No one there. Just shelves lined with dusty snack boxes and canned food. I told myself I was just tired. 14 hours of driving could mess with anyone's head. Back outside, I started filling my tank. The pump's mechanical clunk echoed strangely in the empty night. The sound of gasoline gurgling through the hose was almost comforting in the silence. Then I heard it. A knock. It came from somewhere near the side of the building. Not loud, just sharp enough to make me freeze. I glanced around, nothing. Another knock. This time, closer. I looked toward the store window, expecting to see the attendant watching, but the stool behind the counter was empty. The light inside flickered once, then went out completely. My stomach dropped. I set the pump handle down and took a step toward the door, debating whether to check inside or just drive away. That's when the knocking started again. Not from the building this time, but from the other side of my car. Slow. Deliberate. Knock. Knock, knock, hello? I called out, trying to sound steady. My voice came out thinner than I wanted. No answer. I leaned slightly to look around the car, but there was no one there. Just my reflection in the window, pale and tense under the flickering lights. I backed away toward the driver's door, my heartbeat pounding in my ears. Then I heard it again, softer this time. A whisper. It came from behind the car. A single word, drawn out, and almost melodic. Wait. That was enough. I jumped into the driver's seat and slammed the locks down. My hands were shaking as I turned the key. The engine sputtered but didn't start. Come on, I muttered, turning it again. Still nothing. The knocking returned. Louder now. This time on the rear windshield. 3 perfect, rhythmic taps. I forced myself to look in the mirror, and I swear to God, for half a second I saw a face staring back. It wasn't the attendant. It wasn't even fully human. The skin looked pale and stretched, eyes wide and glassy, as if it had been submerged underwater. The face vanished as the lights flickered again. I tried the ignition one more time. The car roared to life. I didn't even bother removing the pump, I just floored it. The hose snapped free as I sped off the lot, tires spitting gravel behind me. My heart was hammering so hard it hurt. The rearview mirror showed nothing but darkness, but I kept glancing back anyway, half expecting to see headlights following. For nearly 20 minutes, I drove blind through empty stretches of road, waiting for the GPS to reconnect. When it finally did, the map showed something that made no sense. The station wasn't there. The map listed a rest stop, Old Harlan Junction, but no gas station. Just a gray patch of land surrounded by forest. I figured maybe the GPS was outdated, or the place wasn't registered anymore. But when I reached a small diner off the next exit, I had to stop. My nerves were shot. Inside, the waitress looked at me like I'd seen a ghost. "You okay, honey?" she asked. I nodded, then hesitated. "You know that gas station up the road? The one with the red neon sign?" Her face changed immediately. The color drained from it. "What station?" she asked. "The one maybe 10-15 miles south, old place. 2 pumps. Man in a flannel inside." She shook her head slowly. "That place burned down back in 2009. Attendant was inside when it happened." I thought she was joking, but she wasn't smiling. I was just there," I said. "No, you weren't," she whispered. "There's nothing out there but the ruins. Folks who go looking for it say sometimes they still see the lights on, but there hasn't been gas there in over a decade." I didn't know what to say. My clothes smelled faintly of gasoline. My tank was half full. I had definitely pumped something. When I drove back through that same route in daylight a week later, I looked for it. The gravel pull-off was there, but the gas station wasn't. Just a cracked concrete foundation, overgrown weeds, and a rusted sign lying in the dirt. But what really messed with me was this. Near the broken foundation was something half buried in the ground. A single red plastic gas pump handle, still attached to a torn hose. I didn't touch it. Now, whenever I drive long distances at night, I make sure my tank's full before sundown, because sometimes when you stop for gas in the middle of nowhere, the place that helps you refuel might not even be real, and if it is, and it might not want you to leave. The man standing by the road sign. This happened to me in the summer of 2021, somewhere between Nevada and California. I was 26 at the time, driving back home to Los Angeles after visiting my parents in Utah. It was a long, lonely stretch of road, one of those highways that cuts through miles of empty desert where the only light comes from your own headlights and the occasional 18-wheeler. It was around 2:15 a.m. I remember the exact time because I had just checked my phone to see how much farther I had before hitting Barstow. The GPS showed 70 miles to go. I was running on caffeine and old playlists, windows down, warm air brushing against my face. At first, the drive felt peaceful. The sky was cloudless, full of stars, and the desert stretched endlessly in every direction. But there's something strange about being alone that deep into the night, after a while, the silence starts to feel alive. I noticed it when I turned off the music for a bit. My car was the only sound. No wind, no insects, no hum of power lines, just nothing. That's when I saw him, a man standing by a faded road sign on the right side of the highway. At first, I thought he was a hitchhiker. He was standing perfectly still, his arms hanging by his sides, staring at the road. The headlights hit him for just a second before I passed, and what I saw didn't sit right with me. He was wearing a light-colored shirt, maybe white or beige, but it looked stained, like it had been through dust and sweat for days. His jeans were torn at the knees and his skin looked sunburned. But what really caught me off guard was his face, or rather, the way he was facing. He wasn't looking toward oncoming cars. He was facing away from the highway toward the desert, just standing there. It made no sense. I thought maybe he was lost or dehydrated, so I slowed down a little and looked in the rearview mirror. But he hadn't moved. Not even an inch. Something about it made my stomach twist. I told myself it wasn't my problem and kept driving. About 10 minutes later, my low fuel light came on. That jolted me out of my thoughts, and I hadn't realized how low I was. I checked the GPS again, and it said the next gas station was about 25 miles ahead. I figured I could make it if I kept a steady pace. The highway stretched out forever, straight and empty, my headlights illuminating the shimmering asphalt ahead. Then maybe 15 minutes later, I saw another sign coming up in the distance. Only this one looked familiar. As I got closer, my stomach sank. It was the same road sign, same faded green color, same bullet hole near the top, and beside it, the same man, standing in the same position. I hit the brakes and slowed to a crawl, staring out the window. My mind scrambled for logic. Maybe it was another person who looked similar. Maybe I was just exhausted. But no, his posture, his clothes, everything was identical. He still faced away from the road, hands limp at his sides, head slightly tilted as if listening to something out there in the dark. I didn't stop. I pressed the gas and sped past, my chest tightening. For a while, I tried to convince myself I'd imagined it, that I was just seeing things from the monotony of the road. But when you're alone out there, the quiet plays tricks on you. Every shadow, every patch of darkness feels like it's watching. Around 2:45 a.m., my GPS started glitching. The blue line froze, then flickered, showing my car icon circling back on itself. I tapped the screen, but it wouldn't fix. Then a few minutes later, I saw headlights behind me. At first, I felt relieved. Finally, another driver. But as the lights grew closer, I realized they weren't moving steadily. They'd surge forward, then fall back like whoever was driving kept tapping the brakes. When they got within a few hundred feet, I could see it was a large pickup truck. Old, maybe 90s era, with those square headlights. It stayed behind me, following every move I made. I didn't like it. I switched lanes, but so did the truck. I sped up 70, 80, and it stayed right on me. Then it flashed its high beams once, twice. I remember my throat going dry. I tapped the brakes slightly to signal back, but the truck didn't react. Instead, it started drifting closer to my lane. Too close. What the hell? I whispered, gripping the wheel tighter. That's when I saw something I'll never forget. As the truck pulled up alongside me, I turned my head, and in the driver's seat, lit briefly by the dashboard glow, was that same man. Same torn jeans. Same stained shirt. Same sunburned face. He wasn't driving, though. He was sitting there, perfectly still, hands not even on the wheel, staring straight ahead. The truck stayed beside me for a few seconds, just pacing me in silence. Then it drifted slowly back and disappeared behind. When I looked again in the mirror, it was gone. No headlights. Nothing but darkness. I was shaking so badly I had to pull over at the next rest stop I found. The sign said, Black Ridge Rest Area, next 1 mile. I took the exit so fast my tires screeched. The rest stop was empty. Just a few old picnic tables and a single lamp buzzing weakly near the bathrooms. I parked under it and sat there, trying to steady my breathing. That's when I saw movement in the distance, maybe 50 yards away. By the far side of the lot, a man was standing near the Welcome to Black Ridge sign. The same man. I froze. I didn't move, didn't even breathe. He wasn't looking at me. He was facing away again, toward the desert, shoulders rising and falling slightly, like he was breathing heavily. Then slowly, his head began to turn, not all the way, just enough that I could see the corner of his face. His mouth moved like he was whispering something. I couldn't hear it through the closed windows. But the movement was unmistakable, and then I heard it again, not through the glass, but from somewhere much closer. A faint whisper from the back seat. It said, "Don't look." I spun around instantly. No one there. Just my duffel bag and an empty jacket. When I turned back toward the sign, the man was gone. I didn't wait another second. I floored it out of that rest area, merging back onto the highway like my life depended on it. I drove straight until sunrise, refusing to stop again. When daylight finally hit, I started seeing other cars again, and the sense of dread began to fade, but it never left completely. Later that afternoon, when I finally reached Los Angeles, I pulled over at a gas station and decided to look up that stretch of highway. I wanted to know if there had been any incidents there. Accidents, murders, anything. What I found made my blood run cold. About 5 years earlier, a man matching that exact description, torn jeans, sunburned face, light shirt, had been reported missing in that area after his truck broke down near mile marker 117. His body was found days later, several miles into the desert, curled up beside a road sign. He'd died of heat exhaustion, but what stood out most was the coroner's note. His shoes were missing, and his body had been found facing away from the road, toward the open desert, just like I saw him. Now, when I drive at night, I make it a rule never to stop on empty highways, because sometimes when you see someone standing by the road, they're not looking for a ride, they're looking for you. The vanishing convoy. This happened in 2020, during one of the loneliest stretches of my life. I was 27, hauling electronics from Phoenix to El Paso for my delivery job. I'd been doing overnight runs for months, so driving through the desert at night didn't bother me anymore, or at least I thought it didn't. That particular night, I left Phoenix around 9 p.m. The desert was still warm, the sky pitch black except for a few scattered stars, and the highway ahead shimmered faintly in the heat haze. It was the kind of drive where you could go an hour without seeing another set of headlights. By 12:40 a.m., I was about 50 miles west of Lordsburg, deep in the nothingness. The radio kept cutting in and out, so I turned it off. The silence out there has a sound of its own, a low hum in your ears that makes you aware of every heartbeat. I'd been driving for hours when I saw lights up ahead, 3 pairs of red taillights in a line, far in the distance. Relief washed over me. After that much emptiness, seeing other vehicles felt comforting. As I got closer, I realized it was a convoy of trucks. Old military transport rigs, the kind with canvas-covered backs. They were moving slow, maybe 45 miles an hour, and spaced perfectly apart. No company logos. No license plates I could see. Just dull olive paint, dust-coated metal, and those glowing red brake lights. Something about their formation looked too perfect. Too synchronized. But I told myself maybe it was some government transport, not uncommon in the Southwest. I slowed down a bit and matched their speed from behind. That's when I noticed something strange. There was no driver visible in the rear truck. The windshield reflected my headlights, so I thought maybe I couldn't see clearly. But as I pulled slightly to the left to peek around the glare, my stomach dropped. The cab was empty. No silhouette. No hands on the wheel. Just the faint movement of the steering wheel turning on its own. I blinked hard, thinking I was overtired, but when I passed the second truck, it was the same thing. Empty cab. Wheel turning gently by itself, I muttered, "No way," under my breath. As I approached the lead truck, I expected, hoped, to see at least one person inside. but it too was empty. 3 massive transport trucks moving in unison down a desert highway with no one driving them. I dropped my speed to put some distance between us. My pulse was thudding so loud it drowned out the sound of the tires. Then the radio, which had been silent for over an hour, suddenly crackled with static. Nearly jumped out of my seat. Through the static came a faint, distorted voice. "Or keep moving. Do not stop." It was impossible to tell where it came from. The display showed no station, just 88.0 FM, pure static. Then over the noise I heard something else, a low mechanical clanging like metal hitting metal. It wasn't coming from my truck. It was echoing from somewhere behind me. I looked in the mirror. The convoy had slowed down, and now all 3 trucks had their headlights off. Only the red taillights glowed faintly, floating in the dark like eyes. And they were turning. All at once, in perfect synchronization, the 3 trucks pulled off the highway and headed onto a narrow dirt service road that cut into the desert. The turnoff wasn't marked, no sign, no lights, just a thin path leading into black nothingness. Against every instinct, I slowed down near the spot where they'd turned. The sand was thick there, and when I looked left, I could still see the glow of their taillights, fading deeper into the desert. Then suddenly, the lights blinked out, all at once. Total darkness. No sound. No dust, no engines, just empty desert. I sat there, frozen, engine idling. The wind had completely stopped. The only sound was my own breathing. Finally, I decided I'd had enough. I put the truck in gear and drove on. My hands were slick with sweat and every mile felt like an eternity. 15 minutes later, blue and red lights appeared in my rearview mirror. I pulled over immediately, heart racing, thinking maybe I'd been speeding. A state trooper got out, flashlight in hand. His car door creaked as he closed it, and the beam of light hit my side mirror. "Evening," he said, leaning down to my window. "Everything all right, sir? You pulled off back there for a while." I tried to laugh it off. "Yeah, I thought I saw some trucks leave the road, just making sure nobody was broken down." He frowned. "Trucks?" "3 of them, big ones. Military looking, I think." He stood there for a moment, staring at me. "You're sure about that?" "Yeah," I said. "Just 15-20 minutes ago. Right off the service road about 30 miles back." The trooper straightened up slowly, the beam of his flashlight shifting over my windshield. "That road's been closed since '97, he said. "Washed out after a flash flood. Nothing goes out there anymore. You wouldn't make it a quarter mile in that sand." I stared at him, trying to process that. "I saw them. I swear I did." He sighed and looked out at the desert. "You're not the first to say that." That line hit me hard. "What do you mean?" "Every few years," he said, "someone calls in about a convoy of unmarked trucks heading off the highway around that stretch. We've gone out looking dozens of times. There's nothing. No tire tracks, no evidence of vehicles at all." He tapped the side of my truck lightly. "Do yourself a favor. Don't stop for anything out here at night." With that, he went back to his cruiser and drove off, leaving me alone again under the dark sky. I sat there for a long time, staring at the empty road ahead, trying to make sense of it. When I finally made it to El Paso around 4 a.m., I parked and got out to stretch my legs. That's when I noticed something on the back of my trailer, a fine layer of gray dust, streaked with what looked like tire marks. 3 parallel arcs side by side, perfectly aligned, as if something had been following directly behind me in formation. For weeks after, I couldn't get that image out of my head. 3 driverless trucks, moving in silence through the desert night, turning off into nowhere. A few months later, I tried to look it up online. Ghost Convoy Highway 10, Arizona. And sure enough, there were old message board posts going back decades, truckers talking about the same thing. 3 unmarked transports, always at night, always turning off near mile 212. Some claimed they were old military supply vehicles lost during nuclear tests in the 50s. Others said they were part of a convoy that vanished during a sandstorm, never recovered. No one agreed on what they were. But they all agreed on one thing: if you ever see them, don't follow. Because when those lights fade into the desert, they don't just disappear. They wait. And sometimes, if you look long enough into the emptiness, you'll see their taillights flicker back on, just far enough away to make you wonder if they've come for you next. The hitchhiker in the yellow raincoat. It was late September of 2019 when this happened, and I still think about it every time it rains. I was driving alone from Monterey to Eureka, California, along Highway 1, that long, winding coastal road that hugs the cliffs above the Pacific. It's beautiful during the day, but at night, especially during a storm, it feels like the loneliest place in the world. I had left Monterey around 9:30 p.m., hoping to make it to a small roadside inn near Fort Bragg before midnight. The weather had turned ugly fast. Sheets of rain hammering the windshield, lightning flickering across the black sky, and the ocean below roaring so loud that it felt like the waves could swallow the road whole. The wipers couldn't keep up, and the fog was so thick that my high beams only made it worse. The cliffs were on my left, the drop to the ocean just beyond the guardrail, and to my right were dark, dense trees swaying wildly in the wind. I had the radio on low, just static-filled talk, more for company than entertainment. Around 11:10 p.m., I saw a shape up ahead in the rain, someone standing on the shoulder of the road. At first, I thought it was my eyes playing tricks on me. But as I got closer, I saw the unmistakable outline of a person, tall, thin, wearing a bright yellow raincoat with the hood up. They were facing the ocean, unmoving even as the wind whipped around them. I slowed down instinctively. The idea of someone being out there in that storm seemed insane. When I got closer, I could tell it was a woman. Long, dark hair spilling out from under the hood, her hands hanging loosely by her sides. She wasn't holding a bag or an umbrella, just standing there. I rolled down the passenger window a few inches and called out, "Hey, you okay? Need a ride?" She didn't move. The rain was pouring so hard that my words were almost swallowed up, but I was close enough to see her face now, or at least what I thought was her face. It was pale, like she'd been standing out there for hours. Something about her posture made me uneasy. Most hitchhikers look at you, wave, or make eye contact. She just stared out toward the ocean, completely still. I felt a chill that had nothing to do with the weather. I was about to drive on when she suddenly turned her head. Not slowly, not naturally, but in one sharp motion, and looked directly at me. Her eyes were wide and unfocused, and her mouth was slightly open, as if she were whispering something I couldn't hear. "Do you need help?" I asked again, voice shaking a little. She didn't answer. Just took one slow step toward my car. Something in my gut screamed no. I put the car in gear and pulled away, my tires spinning on the wet pavement. In the rearview mirror, I saw her still standing there, the yellow raincoat glowing faintly in my taillights until the road curved and she disappeared behind the mist. For a few miles, I couldn't shake the feeling that I'd made a mistake. Maybe she really needed help, maybe she was lost. But every time I imagined pulling over again, I remembered that blank, glassy stare. About 20 minutes later, the rain let up just a little, and I started to relax. That's when I saw her again. Same yellow raincoat, same figure, standing on the side of the road. Only this time, she was ahead of me. I hit the brakes so hard the seatbelt locked across my chest. There was no possible way she could have gotten there. I hadn't turned off the highway, and there were no other cars behind or in front of me. She stood in the same position, facing the ocean, rain pounding her hood. I drove past her, heart hammering. This time I didn't slow down. I didn't look at her face. I just kept going, whispering to myself, "No, no, no," as the lightning flashed and the wind howled outside. I drove another 15 miles without seeing a single car or light. My phone had no signal. The gas gauge was dipping below a quarter tank. When I finally saw a small diner glowing off the road near a cluster of cabins, I pulled in fast, shaking all over. Inside, the place was nearly empty, just a waitress and an older man sitting at the counter. The waitress, a woman in her 50s, gave me a polite but tired smile. "Rough night to be driving, huh?" "You could say that," I muttered, trying to catch my breath. "Hey, this might sound crazy, but have you ever seen someone hitchhiking out there?" "A woman in a yellow raincoat?" The older man at the counter turned his head slowly. The waitress's smile faded. After a moment, she said softly, "You passed her, didn't you?" My mouth went dry. "Yeah, twice." How would you know that?" The old man sighed and took a sip of his coffee. "You're not the first. Every few months, someone stops in here asking about her." The waitress nodded. "They say she's been out there for years. Car went over the cliffs one night in a storm just like this. she and her husband. They only ever found the wreck, not the bodies. I felt a shiver crawl up my spine. So you're saying she's a... The waitress held up a hand quickly. Don't say it. Just don't stop for her again, ever. I stayed there for almost an hour, waiting for the rain to ease up. When I finally got back on the road, it was close to 1:30 a.m. The storm had weakened, but fog still clung to the cliffs like smoke. I told myself I'd keep my eyes on the road, not look to the sides, not check the mirrors. But halfway through a winding stretch, my headlights flickered, just for a second. And in that brief flash of darkness, I saw her again, standing in the middle of the road this time. I swerved hard, tires screeching on the wet pavement, the car skidding dangerously close to the guardrail. By the time I steadied it and looked back, she was gone. No one. Nothing. Just the rain. I didn't stop again until I reached the inn near Fort Bragg around 2:15 a.m. The guy at the front desk handed me the key with a sleepy smile, but I barely heard him. My hands were still shaking as I locked myself in the room. Before I fell asleep, I looked out the window one last time. The rain had finally stopped. The parking lot was empty except for my car, and a single, wet footprint just outside my door. It was small, bare and surrounded by faint drops of water, like someone had been standing there in the rain. The next morning, the print was gone. The ground was dry, the sky was clear, and for a moment I convinced myself I'd dreamed the whole thing. But as I loaded my bag into the car, I noticed something wedged beneath the windshield wiper. A small piece of torn yellow plastic. It looked like part of a raincoat. To this day, whenever I drive that coastal highway and it starts to rain, I can't help glancing at the cliffs, half expecting to see her again, standing there by the edge waiting for another passing car to stop, and I pray they don't. The tunnel that wasn't on the map. This happened in the summer of 2021, on a late-night delivery run from Tucson, Arizona, to a client near the New Mexico border. I was driving my pickup, loaded with equipment, and I'd taken Highway 80 to cut through the desert faster. I'd done this route dozens of times before, but that night, something about it felt different. It was a little after 12:30 a.m., and the desert was absolutely still. No wind, no bugs, no sounds except the hum of my tires on asphalt. The stars were scattered thick across the sky, and the moon was full, turning the sand and rocks into ghostly silver shapes. I had my windows cracked open just enough to hear the night air. It smelled dry, metallic, that strange desert smell before a storm. I hadn't passed another car for nearly 40 minutes. When you drive through the desert that long, you start noticing things you normally wouldn't. Small shapes by the road, flickers of light far off that disappear when you blink. I told myself it was just exhaustion. But then, around 1:15 a.m., I saw something odd up ahead. A tunnel, a wide concrete tunnel built directly into a cliffside that I didn't remember ever being there before. At first, I thought maybe I had missed it before. Maybe it was new construction. But the highway didn't usually go through the cliffs, it curved around them. And this tunnel wasn't lit. No reflective signs, no yellow striping, just a gaping black mouth carved into the desert stone. The strangest part? My GPS didn't show it. The map displayed a straight road, no tunnel, no elevation change, just empty terrain. I slowed down. My headlights illuminated the edge of the tunnel entrance. The concrete looked old, cracked and weather-stained, like it had been there for decades. I hesitated, staring at it. I could have turned around right there, but I was running late and curiosity got the better of me. I took a deep breath and drove in. The moment I entered, the sound changed. The hum of the tires turned into a hollow echo, bouncing endlessly off the walls. My headlights reached only about 20 feet ahead before the darkness swallowed everything. The tunnel walls weren't smooth like modern ones. They were rough, uneven, as if hand-carved or hastily built. The air inside was colder, damp, and had this faint, unpleasant smell, like wet metal mixed with something decaying. I glanced at the GPS again. Still nothing. The signal was gone completely. As I went deeper, I noticed something else. The tunnel wasn't straight. It started curving slowly downward, like a ramp leading underground. That was the moment I started feeling real fear. There was no reason for a highway tunnel to descend like that. I'd driven hundreds of miles through desert routes and they never go beneath the ground. The road became rougher, cracked, and I felt the truck's tires bump over uneven patches. The darkness outside my headlights seemed to move like something was shifting just beyond sight. After what felt like several minutes, I noticed faint white markings on the tunnel walls. Letters, or numbers maybe, but smeared, half-faded, impossible to read. The paint looked old, like it had been there for decades. That's when I realized I hadn't seen the other end of the tunnel yet. It should have been short, maybe a quarter mile, but I'd been driving for nearly 5 minutes. Then, I saw something ahead. A flicker of movement, a shape crossing the road just past the edge of my headlights. I slammed the brakes, heart hammering. At first, I thought it was an animal, but as the light caught it, my blood went cold. It was a person. A man, barefoot, wearing what looked like torn work clothes. His skin was pale, almost gray in the yellow light, and his eyes reflected white like an animal's when he turned toward me. He didn't react to the sound of my truck, didn't flinch. He just walked slowly toward the side wall and disappeared into the darkness, like he'd melted into it. I was frozen. My breathing got shallow, and for a moment I thought maybe I'd fallen asleep and started dreaming. But then I saw something glinting on the ground where he'd crossed. A small, old metal name tag. I rolled forward a few feet and leaned toward the window to look. The tag said D. Rios Maintenance. The letters were rusted but still legible. Something about that name stuck in my mind. I pressed the gas lightly and kept going. The tunnel continued to curve downward, and the smell grew worse, stronger, like wet iron and rot. The walls were now streaked with what looked like black residue. I started whispering to myself, almost there, just a few more miles. But I had no idea where there even was. After another minute, the headlights flickered, just once. But it was enough to make my heart jump. When they came back on, there was something written across the tunnel wall directly ahead, in large, uneven white paint. Turn back. I slammed the brakes again. My tires screeched, echoing endlessly down the tunnel. My pulse was pounding so hard I could feel it in my ears. I threw the truck in reverse, but as soon as I looked in the rearview mirror, I froze. There was light behind me now. Faint, yellowish, like the glow of headlights. Another vehicle, except it wasn't moving, just idling there. I waited. The light didn't change, didn't shift. I couldn't even see a shape behind it. No car body, no driver. Just that faint glow growing brighter, filling the tunnel. I turned the wheel, trying to turn around completely, but the tunnel was too narrow. My only choice was to keep driving forward. I pressed the gas and sped ahead, my hands gripping the wheel tight. The tunnel seemed to shake now, a low rumbling sound growing louder. Dust fell from the ceiling in little bursts, and I started to feel dizzy. Finally, up ahead, I saw faint daylight. Or what looked like daylight. I didn't care what it was. I floored the gas. The second I broke through the tunnel's exit, I had to squint. The bright desert sun hit my eyes like a flashbang, but when I looked at the clock, my stomach dropped. It was 5:46 a.m. I had entered the tunnel just after 1:15. I'd been inside for over 4 hours, yet it had felt like maybe 15 minutes. The road outside wasn't the same one I'd entered from either. The asphalt was cracked, half covered in sand, and the surrounding cliffs looked different, lower, more eroded. I checked my GPS, but it took almost 5 minutes to reconnect. When it finally loaded, I saw I was over 60 miles off course, on an old section of highway that had been closed since the 1980s. I didn't stop again until I hit a small gas station near the border. The clerk looked at me funny when I asked if he knew anything about a tunnel on Highway 80. "There's no tunnel on that road," he said flatly. "Never has been." He must have seen the look on my face, because after a moment he added, "You're not the first person to ask, though. Every few years someone comes through talking about a tunnel that doesn't exist. Always out there in the desert, always the same story." I left without saying another word. A week later, I tried searching Arizona Highway 80 tunnel online. I found one old post on a ghost hunting forum. A user named D. Rios, he wrote, "We sealed it after the collapse. If you find it again, don't go inside. It's not empty." That post was dated 1983, and the account had been inactive ever since. To this day, I don't drive through that part of the desert at night, because sometimes on quiet, windless nights, if I pull up the GPS, I swear I can still see a faint gray line appear for just a second, cutting into the cliffs before vanishing again. The tunnel that isn't supposed to exist, the one that waits for you to come back. The last exit. Before the mountains, this happened in January of 2022, when I was driving home from visiting my sister in Denver. I live near Salt Lake City, so the route takes you through the mountains, long, twisting highways where civilization disappears after sunset. I left Denver later than I planned, around 9:45 p.m., thinking I'd push through the night and be home by morning. By midnight, I was deep in the Rockies, and a heavy snowstorm had rolled in. The road was covered in a thin layer of powder, and visibility had dropped to maybe 50 feet. The snowflakes caught in my headlights looked like white static. I was gripping the steering wheel tighter than I realized. My car heater was on full blast, but I still felt a chill that settled deep into my chest. I hadn't seen another car for almost an hour, just me, the storm, and the faint rumble of the engine echoing in that endless dark. When I passed the green highway sign that said "Last exit before summit, 2 miles," I thought about pulling off to find a motel, but I was determined to keep going. I still regret that choice. The mountain road started to narrow. Guardrails disappeared. The snow came down thicker, and the only light came from my headlights cutting through the white blur ahead. My GPS began glitching, freezing on one frame before resetting over and over. Around 1:20 a.m., I noticed a faint glow ahead, a gas station sign flickering through the snowfall. Relief hit me like a wave. It was the first sign of life I'd seen in hours. The exit ramp curved sharply downhill. I took it slow, tires crunching over ice, until the beam of my headlights caught the small gas station at the bottom. A single building, lights dim and half buried in snow. The old-style sign read, "Mountain View Fuel, open 24 hours." I pulled in, parked near one of the pumps, and shut off the engine. The snow instantly swallowed the sound, leaving a thick silence. The station looked old, maybe abandoned. The windows were fogged up and the fluorescent lights inside flickered weakly. But I could see movement, someone behind the counter. When I stepped out, the cold hit me like a wall. The wind howled through the trees, and every crunch of my boots sounded too loud. As I approached the door, I caught my reflection in the glass, and behind me for a split second it looked like there was another figure standing near my car. A tall, dark shape in the snow. I spun around fast. Nothing. Just the swirling snow and the empty road stretching back up the exit ramp. Inside, the store was dimly lit and smelled faintly of dust and old wood. A man stood behind the counter, mid-50s maybe, pale, with a heavy beard. He gave me a polite nod but didn't smile. "Hell of a night to be driving," he said quietly. His voice was low, almost muffled by the humming lights. "Yeah," I said, still trying to stop my heart from pounding. "Didn't think the storm would be this bad." He looked past me, toward the door. "You come through from Denver?" "Yeah, heading to Salt Lake." He nodded slowly, his eyes lingering on the glass door again before meeting mine. "You're smart to stop. Folks don't usually make it through the summit on nights like this." Something about the way he said it made my stomach tighten. I grabbed a bottle of water and some jerky from a shelf just to make conversation. "Is there anywhere to stay around here?" The man's expression shifted. "There used to be a lodge about 10 miles up," he said. "Closed down years ago after an incident." He trailed off, then added softly, "You'll find a small rest area right before the climb. Park there till daylight. It's safer." I nodded, paid in cash, and thanked him. But when I turned to leave, I noticed something odd. A second man, standing at the far end of the store near the restrooms. He was facing the wall, motionless. At first I thought he was another customer, but he didn't move or make a sound. His clothes were dark, soaked, and his hair hung over his face like he'd been out in the storm for hours. The man behind the counter followed my gaze and quickly said, "Don't mind him. He's just waiting for a ride." I wanted to ask more, but the way he said it made me stop. When I stepped back outside, the snow had eased slightly. My car was half covered already, and the road was just a faint white ribbon leading back toward the highway. I got in, started the engine, and glanced in the rearview mirror one last time before pulling out. Someone was standing by the gas pumps. It wasn't the man from inside. It was another figure, wearing a heavy coat, head tilted slightly, watching me. I blinked and the snow swirled across my windshield. When it cleared, the figure was gone. I drove fast up the exit ramp, desperate to reach the highway again. But when I got back onto the main road, something felt off. The lane markers were gone, replaced by uneven patches of ice. My headlights caught tall snowdrifts where there hadn't been any before. And up ahead, just beyond the next bend, I saw headlights coming toward me. I slowed down, waiting for the car to pass. But it never did. The lights just hovered there, motionless, as if the vehicle was stopped in the middle of the road. When I got closer, I realized they weren't headlights at all. They were lanterns, two of them swaying slightly, hanging on poles stuck into the snow. I stopped completely, my hands gripping the steering wheel so tight they hurt. The storm had gone silent again, not a single sound outside. Then, a knock, soft, deliberate on the passenger window. I turned my head slowly. A man was standing there in the snow. His face was pale, his beard matted with ice, and his eyes wide and glassy. His lips moved, but no sound came out. I scrambled for the door lock, but before I could hit it, he leaned closer and whispered something I couldn't fully hear through the glass. It sounded like, "Don't go back." Then he stepped away and vanished into the snow. The lanterns flickered once and went out. I hit the gas, fishtailed for a moment, and sped up the mountain road. My chest felt tight, every instinct screaming to turn around, but I kept going until I finally saw a sign. Summit, 2 miles. That's when I noticed my gas tank was nearly empty. I hadn't driven that far, and it made no sense. The gauge had been at half when I left the station. Now the light was flashing red. The next few minutes are a blur. I remember the snow thickening again, the sound of the wind rising, and the road narrowing to a single icy lane. My headlights caught movement along the trees, shapes pacing me on both sides, too fast to be human. Then, out of nowhere, the road split, a small unmarked exit road veering off to the right. It looked freshly plowed, tire tracks visible in the snow. I didn't even think. I took it. The exit wound down into a clearing surrounded by trees. There was no rest stop, no signs, just an open patch of snow and the faint sound of water somewhere nearby. I parked, shut off the car, and sat there trembling. The dashboard clock read 3:46 a.m. I must have dozed off because when I woke, daylight was creeping through the windshield. My breath fogged the glass and everything outside was still and quiet. But when I looked around, my stomach dropped. The tire tracks I had followed into the clearing, they ended about 20 feet behind my car. Nothing led in, nothing led out. I got out, walked a few steps, and looked up toward where the main highway should have been. There was no road, just a sheer drop-off, a cliff edge, 50 feet away. If I'd driven forward another few seconds last night, I would have gone right over. When I finally made it back to the real highway later that morning, I saw the same green sign I'd passed the night before. Last exit before summit, 2 miles. But there was no exit ramp beneath it, just a snowbank, an unbroken guardrail, and no gas station anywhere in sight. To this day, I don't know what I drove into that night. But sometimes when I pass through those mountains, I still glance at the snow through the window, half expecting to see a flicker of lantern light in the storm and a man's face whispering through the glass. Don't go back.